Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. The COVID era has offered the unique opportunity to reflect on what motivates consumers' everyday decisions. Whether we're creatures of habit or hungry for novelty, the pandemic has been a foil to some of our most staunch consumer behaviours. Companies like the Verde Group have been keeping a close watch. We're no longer discussing if, but rather how the pandemic has influenced the consumer-retailer relationship. Paula Courtney, President and CEO of the Verde Group, untangles some of the shifts and trends that we've seen in the retail space during the pandemic. In outlining the latest data collected by our company, Paula sheds a surprising light on changing consumer behavior, friction, loyalty, and the boomerang effect.
But I can tell you the single biggest area of pain and need is retailers need to figure out the returns process. That, because people are buying things and they're getting stuff delivered to their home that, maybe 50% is going to have to be returned. That process of returning an item, the payment of having to pay for shipping.
Let's listen in now. Paula, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. We haven't seen each other in a while, and we go back a few years for sure. So it's such a treat to get you on your podcast. It's actually not your first time on the podcast, but it's been a while, and it's long overdue that we catch up. You got some great work you've been doing pre and during the COVID era, and I'm so interested to get your perspective about how customers are changing and how retailers can change. And anyway, so listen, it's great. Now, we've kind of jumped right in, but tell me, let's start at the beginning for the listeners who may not have heard our first podcast or may not know of you. There might be a few, who knows, still haven't heard of you. You're still famous. But tell us about yourself, your personal professional journey, what you do, and all about the Verde Group.
Excellent. Sure. So I run the Verde Group. We are a global market research consultancy, and we work with organizations to help them measure and manage and ultimately improve the customer experience for greater profitability and financial return. So we've been doing this for 23 years. We work in about 28 countries globally. Most of our clients are headquartered in North America with global field or offices sort of in Asia and Europe and South America, et cetera. So that's how we have our global footprint. So we work in a variety of industries from retail through to pharma, manufacturing, agriculture, and telecommunications. So broad range of experience in a variety of industries, which is beneficial to some of our clients.
And how did you get into this business? What's your personal journey? I'm not sure I know exactly. Like, were you always interested in research when you were growing up around the schoolyard? Were you taking polls of what flavors of gummies people liked? Like, were you always curious about understanding people's motivations, or how did that develop for you?
Interesting question. Well, I've always been fascinated by human behavior and did a science degree at university in psychology, specifically cognitive psych, and with the specialty in psychometrics, which is the business of measuring people's attitudes, personality testing, intelligence testing, when it was kind of controversial at the time. And joined, a large corporation in North America. I joined the railroad and started engaging in research. So did a lot of research with a lot of our business units and really recognized that this is a growing industry, that the ultimate way to understand what drives and motivates your customers is by interrogating them. So I truly believe that customer surveys are still an incredible tool, not the only tool, certainly not the only listening post, but an incredible tool to be deliberate and purposeful in understanding what drives their behavior. So that's sort of my interest. And so much of what we do is really understanding human motivation. What makes people make the decisions that they make, what experiences drive those behaviors. And I've always been fascinated by it. And now I get to build a business that does just that.
You know what I've always liked about your approach, and you and I first started working together way back at the shopping channel. I was going to say the center. We started working together a long time ago at the shopping channel, Ted Starkman, and your perspectives around I thought was unique in terms of here's the break points of the experience, but then you would index them as in if you can win and fix this break point versus that break point, you can really increase loyalty, and that was a whole new perspective in some ways, right? It was, don't worry about that worry about that you're causing some grief with your customers, but understand which ones you can address ranked order and that will really turn it around, like everything from returns to, interactions on the phone. So for me, I really appreciated your approach and your tradecraft. Now, this is the first time we've had a chance, as I said, to chat, I think since the dawn of the COVID era. And I want to get to your Wharton Baker retailing study, understand the boomerang effect of loyalty programs a little bit later. As you've, as a keen observer of human behavior, as a retail expert, what are your thoughts around this COVID era? Like, I've talked to people who've said I've said there's never been a circuit breaker of consumer behavior like this before. Roger Martin has said, you've got to look at consumer behaviors as decaying assets on the balance sheet. What they do today is not what they've done before. I've heard acceleration. I've also heard the other side is like, maybe it's just going to be a big regression to the mean and there won't be much change. Where do you sit on that spectrum? What's your perspective?
It's a fabulous question, and one that we have researched, actually. We've done all throughout the pandemic. We did some large-scale studies in the U.S. with consumers to understand their experiences when shopping. So we did a pre-pandemic study, literally like a month or two before, countries went into lockdown. And then we did a massive study in the heat of the second wave of the lockdown. And then we did a third study. So we've sort of been researching customer experiences, their expectations, specifically around retail. And we continue to do work in a broad range of industries, whether it's agriculture or financial services, through some of our clients throughout the pandemic. And, there's some startling observations. So the first one is that not much has changed. So the thing that we thought was going to happen didn't happen. And what is that thing? Well, we expected that consumers, people, us folk, who are suffering, who are, we're either at home with kids, we might have lost our jobs, everyone has taken a hit of some sort, and we've all, acclimatized to this new reality. So what we thought was going to happen is that consumers would be forgiving of businesses, that they would give them a hall pass and say, you know what, we get it. We're suffering, you're suffering too. You've had to shut your doors, you've had to lay off staff. So we don't expect that you're going to be at your all-time great performance. That is what we expected to see. And that is not what we saw. In fact, customers are even more demanding. So it could be that they have all this frustration and their sensitivity to problems and friction is heightened. But what we noticed is loyalty around the board, like across a variety of industries, including and especially retail, just went in the toilet. And consumers reported more problems. And we think we know why for retail, and the reasons are various for other sectors. But for the retail sector in particular, we notice that people are changing how they do business. So customers who weren't used to, online shopping are now, they have no choice. They're forced to do digital, interfaces with organizations that normally they'd walk into a store, get their goods. And, you had first-time consumers who are using groceries and having them delivered. And that was new for them. Even though it's not new in the industry, it was new for them. So that was happening at the same time as retailers were reeling with the changes to their business, that they had to shut their doors and they had to provide a digital experience that was at least palatable. And they weren't doing well. They were growing pains for the retailer in terms of providing an exceptional digital experience because the demands were so great. I mean, I was just speaking today to a CEO of a specialty retailer this morning, and she was saying that, digital or online represented less than 5% of their commerce. And now it's 50%. And we weren't ready, is what she said. We weren't ready. So you've got two things sort of coming together. You've got a consumer who's learning how to do most of their shopping online, and you've got a retailer that's learning how to provide, good service or a level of service, online. And then you've got the behemoth, Amazon, who's been excelling and keeps getting better and better. And so the gap between them and other retailers has just grown exponentially. So what does this mean? Our observation is that there was pain everywhere, pain by the retailer and pain in particular for the consumer. So no hall passes, no breaks were given to any retailer. Loyalty is down. Friction is at an all-time high. And I think this poses even greater challenges for retailers as they try to get back on their feet, dealing with other economic issues that they have. So
it's a fascinating series of observations because I think the conventional wisdom, because so many retailers, as you said, had to do things, the stores are locked, unprecedented. They had to stand up curbside real fast because it wasn't, you might have dawdled on it for years, but yeah, you've got to do it real fast. And the conventional wisdom is that there was some degree of forgiveness by consumers. Maybe that forgiveness waned. Maybe it was never there. Maybe it was a phantom. Your research says seems to point to at least 18 months into the COVID era that forgiveness is past. That's interesting. And it's interesting. It affected different retailers. Like even the best retailers, the best efficient retailers. Let me be precise. They struggled with supply chain challenges like everyone else. Like think about, you mentioned Amazon. They had to push off Prime Day. Their promise, they've had warehouses closed from COVID infections. Their delivery promises changed. So it did impact everybody. And you don't think, as you're right, that a consumer often looks to best in class to balance and set expectations. That's the gnarly challenge of competing, certainly in Canada, against global players, is they have the resources to set a very high bar. Is that, though, an accommodation for a period of time? And here's the next magic question is, we as consumers and retailers have adjusted to the period, but what structurally in your mind has changed? Maybe that is covered in your report, but any thoughts on that just before we get to the report?
Sorry. So the question is, what has structurally changed with respect to
consumer behavior? So if consumer behavior, we all did different things. We chose different retailers. We couldn't find product. We bought from channels we'd never bought before. What's going to stick? What of these behaviors has actually changed, and what is an accommodation? What's a structural change or a behavioral change? Because it feels to me like getting consumers to change their behavior is a big, big deal. Like it's hard to do, but we're seeing big changes.
So, yeah, I absolutely think that people who had a positive experience with specific retailers shopping online, I think that behavior will continue. But I do believe there is an incredible hunger and appetite to get back in a store. So I think bricks and mortar is not dead by any means. And I think that human interaction is so, even for entertainment purposes, I think people want to get back in a store and touch product. Mm-hmm. So I think there's going to be that. But let's face it, the efficiency of certain retailers of ordering something in the morning and having it delivered that same day or the next day, that convenience is pretty remarkable. And I think people will enjoy that for select purchases and for select goods. So I think there's going to be a bit of stickiness and staying power with respect to channel choice. And that will be retailer and goods specific. But I believe there will be a resurgence of a desire to go back into the store and interact with product, try things on, you know what I mean? The whole experience of ordering 10 pairs of pants and 2 fit and then having to physically, deal with the returns process, I think that's become tiresome for sure.
Yeah. Does the research that you've done lend any insight to the idea of speed to the curb? So you mentioned it, there are some retailers, there are some products, not a lot, that you can get same day, for example, right? A premium service like Instacart can get it same day. You're going to pay for that though, right? As a consumer, you're going to pay for that versus kind of, expectations. If I get it tomorrow, 2 days from today, 3 days is fine. Like any changes in the behavior of how important it is to be same day, or is that a frill and a niche, or is it becoming mainstream?
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of that being either a pain point or a requirement. But I can tell you the single biggest area of pain and need is retailers need to figure out the returns process. That, because people are buying things and they're getting stuff delivered to their home that, maybe 50% is going to have to be returned. That process of returning an item, the payment of having to pay for shipping to return an item that you don't like, not because it's defective, not because it's the wrong size or they shipped you the wrong product, but because, I don't like it anymore. Yeah. We're paying for that. And that is creating tremendous pain. So all of the economics and ease of fulfillment with respect to returns process is a huge area of opportunity for retailers.
Okay, I got a question for you. So you run a retail e-commerce business, and you've got $1 to spend, but you can only spend $1, and you've got to make a choice between getting products to the doorstep faster or improving the returns process. Where would you put your dollar?
Oh, no question, a returns process, 100%. People manage their expectations on the delivery. It's like, I'm going to get it tomorrow, fine. But if I have to pay to return it, if it comes and I don't like it, if there's something wrong with that product and I've got to now, go through the pain and suffering of printing off the shipping label, the return label, going onto the website, clicking return. So like I was just on a website doing a return today with Sephora, and this is awful. You had to enter the order number, but in order to get the order number, you had to exit 3 screens, go find the order number, cut and paste, and then go back into the return screen to enter it, to return, print the label, and I have to physically go to a Canada Post outlet to return a $39 product because it was defective. And I cannot tell you how annoyed I was, how annoyed I am. And it made me think, I'm not doing this again for this retailer. Like, I'm just going to physically go look at the product, make sure it's intact, because it's a too low cost of an item and my time is worth more than that. So
at what point, though, do you say I'm going to choose another retailer because that component? It didn't sound in that example, just to pull that thread a little bit, it didn't sound, you said, well, I'm just not going to shop online, but I'm still going to shop with them. So is it still where you want to put your dollar?
I might not. That's an excellent question, which one we tested. So I was disappointed in the retailer for creating a sort of cumbersome, complex return process. So it sort of made me think, you know what? This kind of is how they are anyways. You go in, there's always this massive lineup. It's kind of disorganized, hard to find what you're looking for. Maybe I'll just go to my regular department store. I know exactly what I want, pick up the product, and out I go. So yeah, I think this is a sample of one. It's not something that we've tested. However, we have researched that if you have significant pain in a process with a retailer, it makes you consider, especially a multi-brand retailer, which Sephora is, it might make you switch, especially if you know you can get that product elsewhere. So yeah, it is a real threat. It's a real risk, and it's happened to me this morning. So there you go.
Well, let's turn our minds now to this Boomerang study you did with Wharton, and I'll put a link into the show notes where folks can find it. It's a great study. It's on the Verde site, for example, right? You can download it there. I'll put that link in. What struck me, and I really wanted to talk about this, is because you and I have been working together for a long time. You've been publishing insights for a long time along the same veins. I was looking at loyalty damaging rankings 1 through 10. And just for the listeners, number 1, you purchased an item online, had to pay shipping to return it. There's picking up. The website app was difficult to navigate. Number 10 was the sales associate did not treat you with courtesy and respect. What struck me as I looked down all of these elements was how if I looked at those elements 10 years ago, they would have been ranked differently, right? That the intersection between online and the stores is now the break point more often than a gnarly associate. Am I reading that correctly? It's really interesting.
You are, and that is exactly what I would have said if you would ask the question 5 years ago, what would have I seen differently? And I would have seen the role of the store associate, because people were shopping more clearly in brick and mortar than they are now. Plus, we measured and we did this study during the pandemic, where for sure, online shopping has grown significantly, not necessarily by choice, but there's no other way to shop. So yeah, the role of the sales associate is dissipated. It's not as important. It doesn't mean that it will disappear. I think it is very important, and we're going to see that come to fruition when brick and mortar opens again. So I think that's really critical. But that is true. All of the top damaging issues that we saw in this last study were related to the online experience and the return experience being problematic.
Interesting. Did you see anything in the study that surprised you? Did anything jump out and go, wow, I didn't expect to see that?
The biggest surprise was in the presence of a loyalty program. And that was the whole essence of the study. It was really to understand, we know that friction occurs in retail. That's a fact. Every experience that, every retailer does create some friction for their customers. Yeah. So no news there.
And it's also no news that retailers can't fix every single problem. And this is what I love about your work is say, listen, I got 10 problems, but I got $1. I got to pick. I got to make a choice.
Not only that, but the most frequent problems are not necessarily the ones that you need to focus on the most. And so retailers are usually really good at understanding their most frequent problems because they have multiple listening posts, either social media posts, their store associates, or, other online channels or call centers, which give them an abundance of information about where is the noise coming from. And I call it noise because noise is different from signal. And signal is, does this matter? Does this problem matter? And what we set out to do is we set out to understand the role of a loyalty reward program in this sea of friction. In other words, can a loyalty reward program inoculate a retailer from the economic damage that comes from friction that they're creating for their customers on a regular basis? So can you sort of sustain that hit to your business if you have a loyalty reward program? And the answer is yes and no. So
love that.
It's there are some loyalty reward benefits that do have some inoculation, and then there are others that what we termed create a boomerang effect. In other words, the customer is enjoying this loyalty reward program, and then they experience a particular problem, and the fact that they have a loyalty reward program actually makes the economic damage of that problem even worse.
Wow, interesting.
And so you can actually create more harm than good. And most of the reason why that is because when organizations build these fabulous loyalty reward programs, the marketing department gets together, they meet with the analytics folks, and they meet with some agency to say, what do we need to do? How do we build a loyalty reward program that, gives us the data that we need to push the right products and the right messaging, but also gets customers to come back, et cetera, et cetera. But they never necessarily talk to the operations folks, the people who are executing on policy and procedure to say, how do these two things intersect? And could it be that if we have a return policy that is cumbersome, you require a receipt in order to return a product, and then we have this loyalty perk that is, hey, you get free shipping, and we're going to make sure that you're front of the line and that your return process is easy, but you need the receipt. It's kind of like we're stealing from Paul and paying Peter. It's like, wait a second. So here's this loyalty reward member who's typically a very valuable customer, right? They're spending lots with you. They've opted into the program. They're taking advantage of the benefits. And then they have this thing that happens to them that it's in direct violation of that benefit of that program. Now they're more irked than that customer who didn't have or doesn't belong to the loyalty reward program. So we've got that boomerang effect. What you give out, you're getting back, and it's not a good thing. So
like it's an amplifier. It's so interesting. It's like the loyalty program can be an amplifier of trouble. It
can be an amplifier, an accelerant. That's what we call it. So it either accelerates the damage or inoculates against it. Yeah, it does both. And it depends on the problem, and it depends on the loyalty reward benefit.
Well, since you're talking about inoculation, I have to ask you your advice to retailers. A couple last thoughts around your advice to the listeners and retailers to help them vaccinate against trouble and make sure in their processes where to put their emphasis. What would your 1 or 2 or even 3 pieces of top line advice be for retailers listening today? Other, of course, than to download this great study. And to hire you to help them figure stuff out because you're wonderful at it. But, top line it for me.
So there are 2 big things. The first is that the fundamentals of great service have not changed. Pre, post, during pandemic, whatever crisis is going out in the market, customers still have expectations, and they're on the basics and the fundamentals of your service delivery promise. So good products, easy to do business with, a seamless return policy, and basically hassle-free service. So customers want, it to be easy to buy from you, whatever that means. And they want good customer support when problems do arise. So keeping it simple and always going back to the basics will never lead you astray. I mean, I think that's always a very important thing to remember. The second thing is, if you are going to build a loyalty reward program, really think about the totality of that customer experience. And that is, what are your operational, policies on, returns or, checkout experience? What is that like for the customer? And what are the loyalty perks? And how do those 2 interact? And, do they collide in any way? So it's really working with the operations folks, marketing folks, having everyone at the table and recognizing that there is a boomerang effect to loyalty reward programs.
All right. So listen, great points. Let's end it off with one super last question. 2 starts and 1 stop that retailers today should undertake. They should start doing these 2 things if they're not today, and they should probably stop doing this one thing if they're doing it.
So I think the start, if they're not doing it today, is to truly measure the impact, the economic impact of friction on their business. In absence or presence of loyalty reward program, there is a real economic downside to friction, and really understand it. It enables you to prioritize where you need to invest and what you need to do differently. So that's the number 1. And if you are going to have a loyalty reward program, like we said earlier, it's really the integration of operational procedures as well as, marketing, offers. Those must integrate seamlessly because there is that boomerang effect that we've seen from this last study. So those are the 2 starts, integrate and measure friction. And I think the stop is stop thinking that bricks and mortar is dead for retailers. Like, really, I think that people are hungry to go back into a store, and you need to be ready. So don't think that whatever we saw, this digital upswing, even the CEO that I was speaking with today said, listen, our online sales are up 50%, but we know that's going to go down as soon as our stores open up again. People want to come back in the store, and we need to be ready. So I think that's my advice, like, be ready.
All right. Well, this is great. Let's leave it there. Once again, the latest study, but it's not the only study, understanding the boomerang effect of loyalty programs, available, done in participation with the Baker Retailing site, available on the Verde Group site, is out there. It's a great read. It's really a nice perspective. And thank you for joining me and sharing perspectives. It's been way too long. We'll have to get you back on and get an update as things start to open up and whatever the new normal looks like. Take the pulse, help us take the pulse. So Paula, thanks again for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure as always.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at emmyleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.